All right, today we're diving into the final dramatic years of India's fight for freedom. This was a time of huge social movements, bold ultimatums, and just immense sacrifice. So, where do we start? Well, our story begins not with a big battle or a political decree, but with an act of defiance so simple, yet so powerful, that it captured the world's imagination and really shook an empire to its core. This first big push was all about mass, non-violent protest. And believe it or not, it all kicked off with a long walk to the ocean. The weapon of choice? A simple grain of salt. See, the British controlled all salt production and slapped a heavy tax on it. This hit literally every single person in India, whether you were rich or poor. So when Gandhi led a march to the coast to make salt from the seawater, he was breaking a law that symbolized the daily injustice of British rule. And wow, that one single act lit a fire across the entire nation. What's so amazing is how quickly this whole thing grew. It stopped being just about salt. It became this massive campaign for social reform and economic self-reliance. People were tackling everything from the caste system to religious unity, all while putting a huge economic squeeze on the colonial government. And this slide, it just perfectly shows you the two sides of this conflict. On one hand, you have Indians practicing what they called satyagraha, this idea of non-violent resistance, of using truth and morality as your weapon. And on the other side, the British response was pure force. We're talking lathi charges, that's police charging with heavy batons, mass arrests, and just general brutality. The protests got so big that the British actually had to come to the negotiating table. This led to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. And this was a huge deal because it was the first time the viceroy, the top British official, negotiated with Gandhi as an equal. A massive symbolic win. But, it was really just a temporary truce. The big question of India's freedom was still very much on the table, which meant an even bigger fight was just around the corner. Yeah, that truce, it didn't hold. Talks broke down, World War II kicked off, and all of that pushed the Indian National Congress to make a final, no-compromise demand. So, get this. India was being asked to send its soldiers to fight for freedom in Europe while being denied its own freedom back home. The British sent this thing called the Cripps Mission, basically offering to talk about more self-rule after the war. But that was not what India's leaders wanted. The offer was rejected, and patience had officially run out. So what do? Negotiations are at a dead end, the world is at war, the peaceful approach had hit a wall, something had to give. A totally new, much more intense phase was about to kick off. And it all came down to these three powerful words from Mahatma Gandhi on August 8, 1942, as he launched the Quit India movement. It was a call for an immediate end to British rule. The message couldn't have been clearer: achieve independence or die trying. The British response was immediate. They thought, let's cut the head off the snake. Within hours of that do-or-die call, the entire top leadership of the Congress was in jail. But it completely backfired. Instead of crushing the movement, it just handed leadership over to the people themselves. And things just exploded. It was leaderless. It was spontaneous. You had people from every part of society taking charge. There were massive strikes. 100,000 mill workers in Jamshedpur walked out for 105 days. Students, farmers, women, everyone was on the streets. And in a lot of places, things turned violent, with people attacking the symbols of colonial power. Okay, so while all this chaos is happening inside India, a whole other front in the war for independence was opening up thousands of miles away. And it was led by a man who had a very different idea of how to win freedom. And that man was Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, Bose was a big deal, a former president of the Indian National Congress, but he and Gandhi just did not see eye to eye. Bose was convinced that nonviolence wasn't enough. He believed India had to fight, with an army, to kick the British out. His famous rallying cries were "Chalo Delhi, let's march to Delhi," and "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga," which means "give me blood and I will give you freedom." So in 1943 in Singapore, he took command of the Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army. Its goal was simple and incredibly audacious: march to Delhi and liberate India by force. And for a while, they had some real success, advancing through Burma and reaching the Indian border. But the tide of World War II turned against Japan, their main ally, and the INA's advance was stopped. The campaign ended, and Bose himself died in a mysterious plane crash in 1945.
So even though the Quit India movement was eventually suppressed and the INA was defeated, the combined pressure from all these different struggles had made the British position in India completely impossible to maintain. The end was near.
The final blow really came in 1946 with a mutiny in the Royal Indian Navy. When the very soldiers and sailors you rely on to enforce your rule start to rebel, you know the game is up. The British Prime Minister Clement Attlee finally made the historic announcement: Britain would leave. But freedom came with a terrible, terrible price. The final negotiations, led by the last Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, ended with a fateful decision: to partition the subcontinent along religious lines into India and Pakistan. Freedom was finally happening, but it meant tearing the country in two. And on this day, after centuries of struggle, India finally awoke to freedom. The British Raj was over, but any celebrations were overshadowed by the immense challenges that were just getting started. Yeah, independence wasn't some magic wand. The new nations had this almost impossible to-do list. They had to divide everything: the army, the government, the national debt. They had to draw new borders, which led to one of the largest and most painful migrations in human history. And all of this was happening amidst horrific riots and violence.
And that really leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? This period is, on one hand, this incredible story of victory, of how ordinary people can topple an empire. But it's also a deeply tragic story of division. The fight for independence was won, but the challenges it created continue to shape the subcontinent to this very day.